Imagine that each morning when you wake up, you're smiling and looking forward to your day, knowing that you're happy even while dealing with grief and loss. The Grief and Happiness podcast inspires, comforts, and supports you with each new episode. For more support, check out the Grief and Happiness Handbook and cards. I welcome you to listen to this podcast and discover endless possibilities for your life. Aloha. I am so happy to have you all listening today because I've got a really special guest with a different look at grief and loss than we've talked about before. And I think you'll really enjoy that. Michelle Sorro has been kind of my mentor through the whole podcasting process, with teaching me how to do it and having all the success that I'm having. And her podcast episode number is 222. Which also happens to be my address and a lot of other connections with that particular number. So I thought it was really cool that that's where she happened to turn up. So welcome, Michelle. I'm so happy to have you with us today.
That is amazing. I feel so honored to be here, Emily. And of course, I know you very well from being in community with you now for many years, but 222 is my number lately.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And I had no idea that was going to be the number that you said. I mean, I never saw 222 before about 4 months ago, and I see it all the time on receipts, on billboards, of course, on clocks. So it's perfect. I love that.
It's amazing how numbers will do that. I just wrote my blog on it today that I posted that about 1111 because yesterday I woke up just thinking, it seems like I overslept, and I looked at the clock and it said 1111. And I said, oh my gosh, it's after 11 o'clock. I've got so many things that I missed doing today. And then I opened my eyes again and realized that was the end of a dream.
Oh my God.
And it was actually like 6:30. And what got me about it is my husband, Ron, and I got married on 1111. And I thought that was just a wink from Ron.
Yeah. Oh, I love that.
So,
well, they say that's how universe is communicating with us, right? Because we are nothing but signs and symbols, right? Mm-hmm. Sacred geometry and numbers, right? 010101. So how perfect. I'm totally with your idea that that's Ron giving you a little God wink.
Yeah. I appreciated that. So we were talking about what you'd like to talk about today, and I just think it's such a good idea. So could you, because as I said, people deal with all kinds of grief and loss, and they're all significant when you're dealing with them, very, very significant. And could you tell us a little bit about your situation and what you wanted to talk about?
Yes. Are we talking about the smoking thing?
Uh-huh.
Oh, okay. I was like, wait, what was it?
Oh, yes, smoking.
Yeah. So, gosh. Well, just a little bit of a backstory, if it's okay.
Sure.
Okay. So I have been a spiritual business mentor, transformation guide, entrepreneur, podcaster, all those types of titles for over 6 years now. Before that, I was an on-air TV retail host. Before that, I was a realtor. And I've had a lot of success, and I've checked off the items on the bucket list kind of thing. But meanwhile, in all that time, I was also a shameful secret smoker, and I would smoke in the evenings and no one knew about it. And I would usually chain smoke like 4 or 5 or more in a row. It's what I did to soothe, but I didn't know that I was soothing. In fact, I had convinced myself over these years that I work hard, I'm successful, all things are relative, but I was really proud of my success. And I didn't know what the cigarettes were actually covering up that I thought it was pretty benign, because the thing I would tell myself is, well, at least I'm not drinking or doing drugs, or it doesn't alter my mind. And I had no idea that from the moment that I picked up cigarettes at 14 years old, that it's because at that time I was dealing with so much anxiety in my body, and I didn't have any sense of belonging, which most of us don't at that age, right? And our bodies are changing, and body dysmorphia came on for me, and just a tremendous deep groove of chronic, low grade, but always there anxiety. And so in June of this past year, 23, I knew that spirit was calling on me to rise and emerge even more embodied in the totality of my power, my divinity, my truth, right? My authentic essence. And I say that with all the humility in the world. We all have that, but where are we covering up? And so in June, I got really sick. And I hadn't gotten sick, and even during the whole lockdowns, I just never got sick. I was I thought healthy, smoking all that time. But nevertheless, that was how in denial I was. It was cognitive dissonance about the smoking really doing anything to me. But in June, when I got the COVID, I think it was COVID, I tested as COVID, although these days you never know, really know. But I was sick in bed for about 3 weeks. And the message that I got on day 2 of that, after I had smoked cigarettes while so sick and still outside smoking cigarettes. That's how addicted I was. Sure, no problem here. Look away. No issue at all. My soul basically came to me and begged me to quit smoking. And it was very clear that if I didn't, I was going to die. It was just one of those moments. It was just a moment. And so I remember crying and tears were streaming down my face at 3:00 in the morning. And I was so addicted to the cigarettes. And I had been convinced that in my 30 plus years of smoking, that who would I be without it? It was my friend. It was my confidant. It was my punctuation mark on grief or joy. The cigarette helped me celebrate or mourn, or it was just always there. And anyone who's ever had an addiction to food or drugs or pills or even work, like we know, right, that is the case. And so it wasn't until I let the smoking go where I was actually able to get present to the grief that was stored in my lungs. And the grief that was stored in my lungs was so profound that in order for me to move through that grief and to be with that grief, I had to first also be with the adolescent. Remember, I started at 14, the adolescent angst. And so I had to literally go back and rewire from 14 years old to present day adult, accomplished woman in life. I had to reconcile all of those adolescent feelings and needs, and I had to validate myself, which then allowed me to fully grieve, like, wow, all those parts of being a young woman and my body changing and me trying to figure out who I am in the world, much less a sense of belonging. All of that was in my lungs and was demanding basically to be healed. And what I've come to know since is that our lungs are our power. It's actually the connection to our power source, which is breath of life, life force, feeling connected, feeling embodied. And so if we aren't connected to our lungs, which is where all of our grief is stored in our body, then we're really kind of running around, not really connected and a bit disassociated, to say the least. So it's probably a lot for me to pause. But when I came to that awareness, it was so big for me, and it got me on a devotional path to really getting serious about my breath work practice and rituals. And so now I've been on that path for a few months, and I feel like a different human. But the grief is still there in moments, of course, but it's been like 8-9 months now of alchemy. And the breath work has really helped. But getting present to that was the first piece for me.
Wow. That's such an amazing story. And I'm sure a whole lot of listeners can relate to it. And it can be other things that they're holding on to that doesn't serve them, but they do because they're finding some sort of comfort in it. And if they could release it, then their life would be different. I know with me, I have been a writer since I was in junior high school. And that was my comfort, because I didn't have anybody to talk to. So I was talking in my writing and whatever it was that I was writing. It wasn't writing that I was doing to share with anybody. I didn't start doing that until a long time after that. But it for me, that was kind of a healthy thing, where I'm not so sure that the smoking was a healthy thing. It felt good for you, I'm sure. But I just think the process of letting it go is, I really admire you for doing that, because that takes a lot of strength.
Well, I remember hearing, thank you, because I do remember that night. It was June 15th, to be specific. And it was like 2:00 in the morning, and I was awakened in the middle of the night And I was in those, when you're really sick and you got the chills and you got the sweats and you have to change the sheets and change the PJs. I was on my second round of that. But this time there was like a message that came up from the soles of my feet. And I knew it was my soul. That may sound weird, but I don't think it will to your audience. And I'd never had that happen before, but it was so clear. And my soul begged me to quit. Basically, it literally begged, like literally said, please. And like, just, you've got work to do. And your channel to the divine is diminished and diluted if you are clouding up the physical vessel that the soul emanates, right, in this incarnation. And we can't really do what we're here to do if you're smoking like this. And it was such a clear message. And that may sound a little far-fetched to some, but probably not to all. And but I remember saying, I literally said out loud, 2:00 in the morning, do I have to?
Mm.
As tears were streaming down my face, that grief was so intense because the way that you described your writing, these cigarettes, it's all a lie. It was an illusion, but I had convinced myself that my cigarettes were my truest confidant because cigarettes aren't judging me for smoking. Cigarettes aren't judging me for smelling like the cigarettes. All of that, right? The deep shame around whatever we do in secrecy that no one knows about, that we would just be mortified if others did know about it. And I had like less than 3 people in my world that knew about this habit. And so it wasn't an easy thing to let go of. But I will thank my soul for coming on, because believe me, there've been moments in these past 9 months where I'm like, just who cares? It's my life, right? Just go back. And it was like, you can't go back when your soul comes on like that. And so if anyone's struggling with letting go of addictions that are causing great grief, or even the idea of letting go is causing tremendous grief, just know that grief, even that grief, is not quite what you'll experience once you move through the grief and then you move to true happiness, true joy, because of the confidence of letting go of patterns that are outdated. When we can actually be our word and follow through and commit and to be on that path, when we know how hard it is, we actually develop and cultivate a confidence that we couldn't have ever anticipated. We're like, my gosh, I'm reliable. I can count on me. I'm doing this for me. No one's asking me. Okay, my soul did, but like really no one's asking me, right, in the 3D world. And that evokes a deep confidence within that you're like, how else can I use this confidence? And that leads to the happiness. So your grief and happiness concept, it's so beautifully tied and possibly here in a way that we hadn't even considered before.
That's right. I think it's really good for people to listen to this and see that a lot of times people say, well, when do you get over grief? And I always tell them that you don't, that as long as you love someone, like I love both my husbands, that's why I keep both of their last names. And I'll live them the whole rest of my life because I don't get over that love. But what I can get over is how I feel about what I'm doing with my life. And when the more I do, I've really found this kind of niche for myself and helping other people dealing with grief and loss, knowing that they can find happiness, that it feels so good. I feel better all the time. With the more successes that happen, the better I feel, and it's just great. And you also mentioned breath work, and I wanted to comment on that because we always start our gatherings when we write together and learn happiness practices with breathing to just get us all centered. And nothing else does that like breathing does, to really pay attention to it. And I've found myself, whenever I need to ground myself, if I start getting a little too busy or feeling not quite right about what I'm doing, I just convince myself, just take some slow, deep breaths and pay attention, because that mindfulness is what is going to help comfort you more than anything else.
Totally. And I imagine that you guys talk about this here a lot, but oh my gosh, Emily, I'm here on the West Coast in Los Angeles area. Guess what time it is?
Rush hour?
It's 222.
Oh, look at it. Yes. I just looked at my thing and saw 22. It's 11:22.
Yes,
It's
yes.
222.
Yes, so
Just for
222, and
you.
I rarely ever look at the clock, and it just caught my eye, and I was like, oh, of course.
Oh, wow.
I love that. I love that. In fact, if you give me a moment, and now I feel like I need to. Someone sent me something the other day on 22, and it feels like now it needs to be shared because 222 has become a bit of a theme, especially this being, yeah, I have to bring this up. Oh my gosh, it's right here. So it's balance, harmony, inner union, relationships, finances, open heart, full trust, flow state, golden frequency, embodiment, magnetism, which is everything that when we move through grief, that experience of joy and happiness actually radiates.
Yes.
Feels
that's
it
beautiful.
feels like it works.
Yeah, that's just beautiful. I love that.
I love that too. Well, what I was going to say before the clock snagged my attention is, you know, over these last couple of years for me, and what I think primed me for being able to get through the moments of wanting to smoke cigarettes in the night, right? Because it became such a ritual. It's very grounding for me. Tobacco is an actual sacred plant medicine, but not the 600 poisons and toxins that the tobacco companies put into the cigarettes, but the tobacco in and of itself is a beautiful sacred plant. That is not what I was smoking. I was smoking American Spirit. So let's be clear. However, I'll still try to hear the thoughts every once in a while of like, well, maybe if you just got just tobacco. And I was like, no, there's no smoking right now in my life. But bottom line is that these past couple of years, with so much that's happened in the world and so much that's going on right now in the collective, in the cosmos and in the crises, in all of it, right? The chaos, we got to feel in order to heal. There is no other way. And in fact, I believe and know with every fiber of my being that this beautiful gift to be human, we're infinite, eternal light, energy, consciousness. We're in this incarnation in a physical vessel, and to take care of our physical vessel is essential, right? We don't have to be so strict about all of it, but everything in moderation. But another gift about being in the physical vessel is our ability to feel our emotions, to feel our feelings, to feel our needs met and unmet. But most of us, because we've been so deeply programmed to just suppress it, deny it, dismiss it, escape it, numb it. But those feelings, including grief, they're paramount for the evolution of our soul's journey. And so I now know that. So it's like, if there's big feelings up, if I have the desire to smoke and just input whatever your addiction is, the food, the drinking, the whatever, right? It could be pills. It could be working. It could be scrolling endlessly, mindlessly, right? On social media apps. But maybe before doing that, just catch the urge to do that thing and ask, what am I feeling? And can I be with myself fully? Can I feel it thoroughly to the point where I can alchemize it and heal it and utilize that energy that was just misdirected for fuel toward whatever I want to get after? The goal, the outcome, the dream, the desire. Does that make sense, Emily?
Yes, absolutely. It's a wonderful way to look at it. I think the more you pay attention, and that's one thing I'm big on, is paying attention. It can bring you comfort. It can bring you strength. It can bring you awareness. It just so many things. If you just really take the time to pay attention to whatever it is you're doing.
Yes. And just specifically the feelings, that would be my recommendation, is that when you have the urge to go do the thing, right? And it's so subtle because it's so automatic that, like, in the beginning of my quitting the smoking moments, I was like, I wasn't even present to that urge was there, right? And then I became more present to it. And I was like, oh, how could I intercept the urge and understand what the urge is actually trying to do, which is to numb me out of the feeling that felt unbearable. The anxiety could be resentment. It could be judgment. It could be fear. It could be unworthiness. It could be doubt. It could be grief, right? All of those things. And so it's just a beautiful opportunity for us to get to know ourselves, honestly.
Oh, yeah. And that's so important. And, a lot of times people think that when they're dealing with grief, that all their happiness is over, that they'll never be happy again, that things, it just can't get any better. But I've found for me, living the way that I do with my focus on the moment, living in the moment, and only doing things that really serve me and in the process serve the other people that I'm trying to help.
Totally.
Then that makes all the difference in the world to me. And I say often, and people express surprise at it, that I'm happier now than I ever have been. And I know I am because of what I'm doing, what I'm experiencing. I can reflect back and think, boy, if I would have been paying this much attention when I had my husband there with me, what a life we would have had. We had a good life anyway, but it could even have been more than it was.
Yeah, I love that reflection. Yeah, thank you for sharing that.
Yeah. It was really good with Ron, because Ron really is the person who taught me to pay attention to the moment, because I hadn't before. I paid attention to the task, whatever the task was. That might have been what I was addicted to, because I was always having to do something, always.
Mm-hmm.
And it feels really good to not be putting that pressure on myself.
Mm-hmm. And also, you are the embodiment of your podcast mission. It's called the Grief and Happiness Podcast. You've written the book on it, for goodness sake, right? And what your audience may not know yet is that you birthed your podcast through a company that I'm a co-founder on. I'm called the Podcast Accelerator. And remember us saying, like, what you name your podcast, you will be the representative of. And so you will become the embodiment of it over time, not right away in the beginning, right? Because we're getting to know ourselves. But like me, I've had a podcast for a long time and 222 episodes as of now. How many episodes are you up to?
222. This year's episode 222.
I'm at 222.
That's too bizarre.
What is that? Oh my goodness.
Wow.
Wow. Okay. So I need to really look into this number a little bit more, because it's clearly everywhere around. Whoa, I didn't catch that. I thought you were talking about my own podcast being at 222 episodes. So my podcast is called Fire and Soul, and Fire and Soul means empowered action from an awakening soul. And grief and so that is very much me, right? And then look at you, the grief and happiness. You just mentioned that there are people that reflect back to you that your happiness is so evident, and it's more so now, even through all the grief. Of course it is, because you are the embodiment of your show.
Mm-hmm.
I love that.
Oh, thank
you.
Well,
really, you're the embodiment
of
your mission, because it's more than just a show. You've got a lot of different things out there. But yeah, I want to take that moment to honor you in that, because this is how it can be done in a way where it's congruent and consistent with what's on our heart to share with the world.
Yes, that's right. And you mentioned how you have the business that got me started, and I consider you such a mentor to me. I don't think that I would have gotten where I am today without being guided by you in the process. And I love doing podcasting. I love what I learned in that process. And you and Jenny made it so easy. You just followed the steps and did them as it went along. And I'm so grateful for that. And I know that we've got another training session coming up real soon.
We do. That's right. God, this is so cool. Do you want to talk about that right now?
Sure. Let's do that.
All right. So you just mentioned Ginny. Ginny was she my very first podcast producer. It's so fun to look back on 2017 days when I got inspired to start a podcast. But I thought it was reserved for celebrities or big brands. That's what I really thought. And I was neither. And then I went to the Google bar. Because I had gone to a personal development seminar, a Tony Robbins seminar called Date with Destiny. And at that time I was on air on an entertainment news show called Extra. And I was only on there one day a week, but that was a big, big dream of mine that had come true after 10 years of just being obsessed with this dream happening. And I got invited to Date with Destiny. And I remember going there with one thought in mind. Tony, help me turn this one day a gig into one day a full-time job on Extra. That's all I cared about. me, right? And day 4 or 5, it was day 5, actually. Day 5 of that event, I dropped to my knees and the 5,000 unleashed souls just alive. And the music was blasting, the lights were shining, and I dropped to the floor because I heard a still small voice that I have no doubt was like my higher self. And it was, you're not going to continue this path of being on TV. You're here for a different mission. You're here to help others step into their missions. And I was like, huh? Where would I start? And so that's when someone at that event said, you should start a podcast. And that's when all my resistance came up of like, who would I be to start a podcast? But I left that event and I started searching on how do you start a podcast? And honestly, after 3 months, I was more confused and overwhelmed than before I started. But that's when truly destiny led me to Ginny. And so we joined forces. She produced my podcast. And then about a year later, I was noticing so many incredible things happening as a result of bringing guests on my show. They were opening up to collaborations with like my mentor, Jack Canfield, as one example. There's many. I was making money by opening up my program invitations as a transformation guide, inviting people into my offerings from my podcast. I was like, there's something here. Wow. If my podcast did that for me, then imagine what podcasting could do for others, maybe even inside my communities. So I reached out to Jenny and I said, Jenny, I know you're a corporate podcast production house. She's a top 3 in the country. And I said, would you be open to this? Taking a group through a program and we'll just produce everyone all at once. And she was like, that's totally insane. I'm in. No one would be that crazy because it is a big task. But Jenny putting on her CEO entrepreneur hat and me putting on my master coach hat, the two of us joined forces. And to date, with you included, we have launched 200 podcasters into the world. So to your point, what's so cool is that anyone who feels like they have a message, a voice, a vision to share with the world, and you don't have to have a big social media following, you do not have to know anything about tech. We walk you through week over week over week in 8 weeks. And we create your cover art with you and or for you, your music for your intro and outro, your recording and your writing of your intro and outro, your show description, your first episode description. We help you create all the marketing around your first episode and your audiogram like a sizzle reel. And then we produce and publish you on all the major apps within the 8-week experience. So it's very bespoke. It's very personalized, very customized. And, we have a boot camp coming up to learn about that. And, or even if you don't want to do a podcast right now, you can learn about the boot camp. Well, here's what happens in the boot camp. It's called The Answer to Podcast Procrastination. So this would be for anyone who's been thinking about it like I was, talking about it, dreaming about it, but it just hasn't gotten done because of all the reasons why it's just so intimidating, overwhelming, and confusing to start, not knowing really where to begin. This boot camp called The Answer to Podcast Procrastination. Inside of it, you'll actually make the 4 key decisions to jumpstart your podcast idea. And then you'll have an invitation to join us in our program if you want. But even at the minimum, you'll be on the path. So that's coming up on actually April 10th. And we've got 2 different times. So if you want, we could leave a link in your show notes and they can register that way if they feel called.
That would be great. I'd love people to have the opportunity to do that. And I don't remember how I ran across you. That's kind of funny. I don't know, and I'm so grateful I did. So I'd like to have that opportunity out there for other people because this podcasting has really changed my life. I have friends all over the world. I never dreamed I'd do that, especially since I live in Hawaii, which is the most remote place in the world. To be able to connect with all these people, it's kind of magical.
It is magical. You know, what you just shared is something that I remember sharing with Ginny. I was like, okay, I've been podcasting for about a year and it's been so magical for me. That was the exact word that I used to describe it to her. I was leaving her an audio note on New Year's Day, 1 year into my podcasting journey, actually maybe only 6 or 7 months now that I think about it, because I launched June 11th, 2018, and I reached out to her on January 1st of 2019. And then we launched our very first class in 2019. And then you were part of 21, I believe, right?
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah, 21. So this, I think, will be our, gosh, I can't recall, either our 8th or 9th, I think 9th round. And it is so, it's just incredible because it's like bite-sized decisions and homework. It doesn't take more than like an hour each week. And you get it into us. And then we do all the hard parts, right? Bringing it all together. And then we put you out on the major apps, and then you'll have an invitation to keep going or not. And most do. And look at you now. You're in the what? The top 10% of all podcasters in the world.
Top 5.
Top 5?
Mm-hmm.
Simply due to devotion. See, here's the thing. Some people say, oh, it's so saturated. Like, who would I be to start a podcast? Do I need a big social media following? No. Did you? No, you just keep going because 99% of podcasters give up before 18 episodes. Remember that? We made you getting to 18. And we have a lot of grads in the top 10 and 5%. It's pretty remarkable. And most everyone says what you just said. Yes, there's been some really strong collaborations and book deals and a lot of money made from podcasting. But the biggest reward that we have found over and over and over again from our grads is what you just shared. I had no idea how much my podcast would change my life. From the people that I invite on that were once these far-fetched mentors or heroes in my life. And when would we ever get access to them if we didn't have a platform for them to share more of their magic and medicine to our audience? And most of the times we get yeses, because are they going to say yes to just a coffee with us or meet on a Zoom? No. But will they say yes to be on your podcast? Almost always yes. What's been your experience of inviting your dream guest onto your show?
Oh, I've been able to talk to people that I never in my life thought that I would actually get to speak to. Speak with. I've got one coming up right now. My husband and I used to meditate every morning, and every morning we would read this one little section out of a book that had things for 365 days. And we read the same book over again for like 5 years because it was so good and we liked it so much. And that book was written by Mark Nepo. And I was thinking about, I wonder if I could ever get Mark Nepo on my podcast. And he's been one of my top dream guests all along. And I started working on it seriously, just deciding that I was going to do it and he was going to be on my podcast. And I started working on it last June, and I'm recording with him next week.
Oh gosh, I couldn't be happier for you. The Book of Awakening.
Mm-hmm. That's one that I read 5 times. Yeah.
I actually had a feeling, even though I didn't know for sure, I'm getting the chills as you say that, but I had a feeling that you were going to say The Book of Awakening, and that book impacted my life. You know that he was a guest on my show, and that felt like such a big get. You know what makes me happier that he was on my show is that he's actually going to be on your show. There's nothing that makes me and Jenny happier than when we hear our grads just getting their dream guests, having such success, and more importantly, authentic fulfillment. That is incredible. And I know you've got also a lot of other dream guests that were once far-fetched, and without a podcast, how would that have even happened?
It's amazing. It truly is amazing. And it led me to one other thing too. I'm now the co-host of a summit, an international summit called From Morning to Light. Mm-hmm. And I got that because of the connection with podcasting. And my partner, the other co-host is in Spain, and we do this together. And what was really cool is we have, it goes on for 10 days, and we have 2 different recordings every day. So each of us did 10 recordings. And I went back to some of my dream guests in my podcast, like Marcy Shimoff, and said, can I interview you again so that you can have the opportunity to be on this summit? And they all said yes.
Yes, I love it. Oh, that's so great. Yeah, it's just beautiful. I love watching you step more into your expansion and through the portal of a podcast platform with someone who previously used writing to connect with others.
Yeah, right? And I still do. It's all intertwined.
Beautiful full circle. Well, yeah. So anyone who's listening who feels called, don't question it. Just listen to the nudge and come to the boot camp. Just check it out. Get to know me and Jenny. See if that call continues. that boot camp is a really great place to explore making some key decisions, like name of your podcast. What would be the description? Are you going to be just interview or just solo, or maybe a combo of both? Do you do a combo of both, or you only interview?
I do a combo because I do a regular size podcast every week that's someplace between half an hour, 45 minutes, somewhere in there. And then every week I do about a 5-minute, I call them love notes, just that are actually, I've been writing a blog for 4 or 5 years now, and I go back and pick out the blogs on the topics that I think people would like to listen to, and I read that blog out loud for people. And I have as many people listening to my short podcast as for my long podcast. So I've got 2 coming out every week.
That's beautiful. Yeah. So when you do your solo cast, your little love notes, are you also on video?
Yeah, well, I've been putting it or recording it on video, and we're working on getting it actually into YouTube so that we can be seen, because I know seeing is really important these days.
Yeah, people want to see, they need to get a sense of, us energetically, vibrationally, all of that. So that's perfect. Man, that's just beautiful. I love hearing that story. And I get inspired by you, Emily, and I am having you on my show because of all of your strides and your commitment to your path, and it's not lost on me at all. So this feels like a really beautiful full circle. Thank you for having me on and for weaving in the grief and the smoking, because it's a real honor, right? Like, I'm so proud of myself. People ask me all the time, like, what are you most proud of so far in life? And honestly, quitting the smoking is my biggest moment of pride, because I know how hard that was for me. I know, it was a lifelong companion of more than any other relationship aside from like my mom and my sister and brothers. But letting that go was really huge. But to be here and experience the joy and the happiness, and then to get to weave that into podcasting, it's like my perfect jam. So thank you.
Oh, it's been my pleasure to have you here. I know you've got other places to go, so we need to kind of bring it to a close, but it's hard to do that because I think we both enjoy talking to each other so much.
Ditto. Yeah, ditto.
So thank you very much for being here today on the show. And I will include show notes that include the link so that you can try that out too. Because you'll love it. Just go. The boot camp thing is awesome because you get kind of an introduction and you go, I can do this. It doesn't seem so overwhelming when you see a simple, beautiful introduction.
Thank you for that. Yeah, that's our biggest mission, is for those that be like, I could never do it for all the reasons why, A, B, C, D, up until Z, right? Times 10. We all have these reasons that we think are so uniquely insurmountable and ours, right? No one else is this bad. But we blow that idea out of the water with results. It's like everybody from stay-at-home moms who've never had a job and barely knew how to like open up a Zoom video, right? Like, they're podcasting 70, 80 episodes later and self-editing. And it's really incredible to watch you all. So thank you for that. And it's been such a fun time to come here. And I hope to see everyone at our boot camp, The Answer to Podcast Procrastination, coming up soon.
That's great. Thank you so much. And thank you to all my listeners. I'm so glad that you make this all possible, because we do it for you. And I'm glad that you are able to take advantage of it and share it with your friends. Tell them about what you're getting and experiencing here. And I will see you next week. And aloha.
Aloha.
Do you want more comfort and support and happiness? Join the Grief and Happiness Alliance at our free gatherings on Zoom every Sunday. Visit my website at griefandhappiness.com and read my books, The Grief and Happiness Handbook, and get your set of the beautiful Grief and Happiness cards. Be sure to subscribe to our podcast, rate it, review it, and binge listen to all of our episodes. I can't wait to welcome you back to another episode of the Grief and Happiness Podcast.